This week's Piltch Point with Avram Piltch is proudly powered by PureVPN. The best way to protect your privacy online is with PureVPN. You can hide your online activities, say goodbye to regional restrictions, and improve your streaming quality. Plus, it's available for almost all of your devices. You can get a special price and a 31-day money-back guarantee right now by going to pilchpoint.live/PureVPN. All right, Avram, what have you been working on?
So I wanted to talk a little bit about something I've been working on for a couple months now, a new topic that we're adding to Tom's Hardware, which I think will be of some interest to folks who either are building their own brand, building a small business, and they want to have a website of their own. We are testing and reviewing web hosting services. And there are many web hosting services, and within them there are many web hosting plans. So let's talk a little bit about what's available to you and what's worth it. So most web hosting, so there's maybe, there's a lot, but we've tested about about 10 most popular hosting services in America, and many of them are also available around the world. And we have tested their different services. So let me share my screen a little bit and show you, for example, one of the services that we've tested and that we recommend, which is called Hostinger. So Hostinger here is actually run out of, I think I'm mistaken, Lithuania originally, but now they have a US office. Like most places, they have a couple of different options. So they have web hosting, which we would call shared hosting, cloud hosting, VPS hosting, and then there's some other places that have what we would call dedicated hosting. So let's talk about the differences are with these. What they are calling web hosting, which other sites like Bluehost, which is another popular site, might call shared hosting, or maybe they'll just call it web hosting too. All of these things, what you're getting here, and these are the cheapest plans, are you are on a server with who knows how many other websites, maybe dozens, maybe hundreds, and you are paying this kind of low cost per month, and then you can set up a website on it using something like WordPress if you want. WordPress is a very popular CMS publishing tool. You get emails related to that. You get email addresses. Obviously, you have to register a domain. Now, most of these places would love for you to register a domain with them. Don't do it. What you should do is register your domain with a separate domain registrar. And of course, they make it a little bit more of a hassle for you to set up if you use a separate registrar, but I strongly recommend it, because if you have your domain tied to your hosting service, then if you decide you want to leave in 2 or 3 years, then you're going to have problems transferring the domain. So, and what happens is they'll give you a cheaper free domain, and what's really killer is most of these plans you see here, it says for 48-month term. Some of them are for a year term, whatever. And then after that, all of a sudden the price is like 5 times as much, right? So they really get you with the long term, after the promotion period is over. So, at that point, you may want to move to another service, and you don't want to have problems because your domain is tied up with that host. So who I would use is either, a lot of people like, and we use Namecheap for doing, for registration. Now, you could also use GoDaddy as another big one. What do you like to use, Scott, for registering your domains?
GoDaddy.
So, Go
Yeah,
GoDaddy is a good one.
that's been my go-to for like 25 years now.
I mean, my personal domain is on GoDaddy, but when we started setting up domains for testing purposes, we wanted the cheapest of the cheapest of the cheap for that. So we set up a whole bunch on Namecheap. So we have like a whole bunch of, you know, here that are like .sbs, which is not a top level domain I would recommend. But we do it because it was $2 each for a year so that
Yep.
we could use them for testing. So Namecheap also would like to sell you hosting, as would GoDaddy, but don't fall for it. You want to keep them separated, right? Um, as the great Offspring once said, you got to keep them separated. So anyway, you have the shared hosting plans, and they are good for a start, but there's limitations in them. There's a limit in the amount of traffic you have. You very often cannot access the shell to run shell scripts or really have any control over the server. And so, you are and once you get hit with a fair amount of traffic, it's not going to last. It's going to crap out. So the next step up, which I personally like the best, is VPS hosting. VPS stands for Virtual Private Server, and what that means is that you are on with other people on a box with other people, but you are guaranteed it is treated as a virtual full server. You have control over it. You can reboot the server, you can install software, you can upgrade the OS, you can run all types of scripts if you want, and they will go forever. I had one place I was running a test script that just writes every minute, writes a log file, and writes to a log file, and I forgot that I was running. I came back after like a month and it was still running. So whereas on the shared plans, they usually after 10 minutes your script will be killed. So I like VPS. On here with Hostinger, you have a choice of a few different VPS plans, and you notice when you look at VPS plans here or elsewhere, you'll see how many CPU cores you're entitled to, how much RAM, and how much disk space. And I recommend you go with no less than 2 CPU cores and 4 gigs of RAM. Ideally, obviously, going up to 4 and 16 is good for performance. And of course, you want that storage space so that if you have a large database, you can grow with it. One of the real gotchas that a lot of these services have, and they don't tell you about it, is that they have, even though they'll tell you that you have X amount of disk space, if you create a database that's more than 4 or 5 gigabytes, they will say, sorry, you've exceeded our database limit. So they don't publicize that the amount that you're using that you're entitled to does not include unlimited space. You can't use all of it for databases. Well, depending on what type of site you're running, I have sites that I run that have 50, 60 gigabytes of database on them. I could not run them on here. So I'm on that kind of plan. Fortunately, Hostinger, their shared plan seems to have a database size limit, but the VPS plan does not. Um, another type of hosting that a lot of people get is called cloud hosting. Now, this is a weird name because isn't everything in the cloud if you're paying for web hosting? That's like calling it hosting, right? But Hostinger has it, Bluehost has it, and some others have it. And it has things that it does well and does poorly. It doesn't give you the amount of control that you have with VPS in terms of your ability to run scripts and install software. You can do some of that, but you don't have full control of the server. And they sometimes do have a database size limit. For example, on Hostinger, I found there was a 6 gigabyte database size limit on their cloud plans. But the cloud plans allot resources in such a way that they are the fastest at serving traffic. So by far and away, when I benchmark these, and one way in which I benchmark them is to run what I call the Apache test. So let me show you what that looks like. So for example, we set up a dummy site on the Hostinger cloud hosting. This is the default WordPress template, right? Now, I'm going to show you what it's now. It may embarrass me with a live demo, but we'll see. I'm going in here to the Windows Linux subsystem for Windows. Or is it Windows subsystem for Linux? And I'm going to run AB, which is a test that will send 5,000 concurrent users at 500 simultaneously to 500 a pop to this site, and we'll see how fast it reacts. Now, with some hosts, it wouldn't even get to the 500. It will just say, sorry, I can't do it, right? On others, the number of requests per second would be pretty small. When this is over, you're going to see here, I don't know if it's blurry, what you'll see is that we managed to do 266 requests per second, or 3.7 milliseconds per request, right? Now, if I go to the VPS plan that we had, right, much more flexibility on the VPS plan, which we had assigned to Tom's Hosting 2, right? Looks the same because they're all using the same dummy site. Now I'm going to do this with 2. You're going to see that it's not going to be nearly as fast as the cloud plan. You can tell already because it hasn't even gotten to the first 500 requests, right? Hopefully it won't time out. Some of them time out. So what we're seeing here is that, with a cloud plan, you definitely get more speed, but less flexibility. With a shared plan, you get the least flexibility and often the least speed, but it's the cheapest. And then there are some places that offer dedicated plans, which means you pay for a whole server per month, but those can be very, very expensive. So the other thing to keep in mind is what exactly are you using to control your site? Like, what tools does it offer you? On Hostinger, which is cheap, by default, they don't give you the best tools, right? They give you the cheapest tools. So if I go into my, say, Hostinger account here, and I look here, so our KVM2, that was our let's see, this is our VPS plan, right? So if I want to, so they have their own little tools for me to go around, which are fine, but they don't offer. But my panel access here is through something called virtual min. It's kind of annoying, actually, how Like you have to go in to get to this web min, virtual min business. May not even actually have the password for this here. But I think I might have to go to Tom's hosting to this PS. So if I go in here, you'll see what this tool looks like. And this is the free tool that you get with hosting, or if you want it free and you don't want to pay extra, you end up with this web min, virtual min tool that is okay, but you really have to find your way around. It's not the best. The best is something that that you have to pay $22 a month extra for, or other places that are more expensive throw in for free, and that would be cPanel. So this is kind of a little hard to navigate, but if I go to say, one of our other sites where we have cPanel installed, you'll see, this may or may not be the right password. Does not like me. All right. Well, what I wanted to show you, and maybe I can go in another way to show it to you. So HostGator is another hosting service that we've tested, right? And what I wanted to show you was that cPanel, which is the most popular tool for hosting, always trying to sell you stuff, really makes it really, really easy to cPanel is combined with something called WHM, which is the control panel used for the whole server. So this is great. You can just go all around and reboot your server here if you want. Look at what version of MySQL database you're running, etc. Restart services. Super duper easy. And then cPanel is for the individual account purposes. So if I get back, I'll look at our shared plan where you can go into cPanel easily from there, and you'll see that it's just so nicely laid out, really easy to do things like install the SSL certificates, which is something that you need. So cPanel, having it or paying extra for it or getting it included is good, but you do pay extra for that. So to make a long story short, we are going through and putting up a lot of reviews of web hosts. So far, Hostinger turns out to be the best bang for your buck in terms of a combination of performance and flexibility and price, although you will pay extra if you want cPanel. Otherwise, you can learn to use the more difficult virtual min tool that I showed you. There's lots of other hosting services around, but my recommendation for folks would be, if you really just want like a one-page, couple-page website to show your, to show your resume or whatever, then shared hosting is okay. If you want to do anything that involves programming or storing lots of data, then I really recommend VPS. And if you are most interested in having a site that's going to serve a lot of people and deal with a lot of traffic, then cloud hosting might be your best bet, but you will have less flexibility in terms of programming.
I have to say, I am terrified about the idea that there is something worse than cPanel.
You think cPanel's bad?
I detest cPanel.
If you think it's bad, though, I'm not saying it's perfect, but you'll love it once you try the others.
I'm I am on Webmin's website and I am looking at the interface and I'm like, holy cow. Yeah,
Right. So
cPanel
that
nailed it.
one, right. So there's, by the way, I should say that there's others. There's like one called Interworks that some use. What I chose, so one thing that's cool about Hostinger is that it gives you a choice. So when you
Okay.
set up your VPS, when you set up your VPS specifically, it says which version of the OS do you want and which panel do you want. And you could choose one without a panel, and then I guess go and try to use the Linux UI, Linux command prompt to do everything. But for everything other than cPanel, or I mean, so everything other than Virtual Min, also it's called both Virtual Min and WebMin, depending on which tab of it you use. Um, you have to pay a licensing fee, and for cPanel, licensing fee is for a single person $22 a month. Now consider that you've paid like $16 a month for your hosting plan. That's more than the cost of the hosting plan itself. Although, to be fair, other VPS hosting plans cost more than that. Um, and then they have others on there like Interworks and others that are like maybe $3, $5, $8 a month, and they might be incrementally better than Virtual Min and not as good as cPanel. I just feel like if you're going to go cheap, you should go all the way. You know,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the reality is you can do pretty much everything that's the same that you could do with cPanel. You just have to find it in the UI, and the documentation is bad. Um, but
And that's,
um,
that's the thing that I found. Like, I don't remember what GoDaddy used to use before they switched everybody over to cPanel. And my initial annoyance was I don't like change. I don't care if it's even for the better. I don't. First thing I do on Windows 11 is put the start button in the left. I don't like change. So, uh,
right,
but
right,
the thing that I really like about cPanel is everybody knows how to use it. Documentation is everywhere. If you struggle with something, yeah,
right,
the actual process of maintaining, SSL certificates is really easy in cPanel. But the option names are not.
right,
I can never remember which one is the one. It's always 3 clicks to get
right.
to it. But once I'm
Yeah,
there, it's fantastic, right? It's the best SSL interface I've encountered. Just
yeah.
getting to it. It's like there's like 3 different options. None of them take you where you want, but and it didn't used to be that way. They
Oh,
changed it in the current version, which annoys me. And again, I don't like
another
change.
thing that one Another thing that's a gotcha. So I said there's a couple gotchas I've discovered. One is the hidden database size limit, which
Mm.
a lot of them don't tell you about, or it might be in the fine print somewhere. But I found a bunch of them where I tried to upload I have like one thing that I do is I do a database test.
Sure.
So I benchmark these things by taking like a 4.5 gigabyte database and doing a massive insert of it. And then I do another thing where I do like a randomization of the numbers in it. And then I do another thing where I do like a table join and a big sum or whatever, and I
Mm-hmm.
time it. And on a bunch of these services, they would not accept the 4.5 gigabyte database,
Yeah, I can
right?
tell you why.
Why?
You're doing MySQL?
Yes.
MySQL stores everything to a single flat file, if I remember correctly. And if they've got the hard drive formatted to FAT32, 4 gig is the maximum file size.
Well, that's not what it says. It just says, sorry, you've exceeded our database size limit. And
Sure.
some of them have database size limits that are higher than that. So like the cloud service on Hostinger, for example, it let me do it, but it also told me that there's a 6 gigabyte limit. So I was within the limit, but it was 6 gigabytes.
Okay,
Right.
that's interesting.
Um, and I don't think you should have any limit. Now, to be fair, if you are creating a WordPress site, which a lot of people are, you will not be using that much database space, most likely. Because
Mm-hmm.
even though a lot of stuff, all your posts will be stored in the database, it'll all be text in the database, and your graphics, any pictures will be separate. And so you'd have to write a lot of articles to
Yeah.
fill up 4 or 5 or 6 gigabytes of database.
Yeah, for
Um,
sure. But
so it
on
depends if
that
you're keeping.
on that
Yeah.
note, it's also important to keep in mind that some of these plans have bandwidth limits. So I'm on
Yes.
Hostinger, and the VPS has a bandwidth limit, whereas the cloud doesn't.
Yeah. What they call, but I'm. It makes me wonder about, like, for example, if you have something with the shared hosting with these $3 a month plans, and they say there's no limit, there's probably a practical limit, right?
There,
Or it just
there's
can't
both
serve
a
that much.
there's both a practical limit and a connection limit. Like on a shared host, um, like most shared hosts, in their what is it, SLA? Yeah, in their SLA, they only guarantee like 16 concurrent connections. So, if you've got 16 concurrent connections, unless those 16 people are downloading videos from your web host
Mhm.
24 hours a day, you're probably not going to get to a 32 gigabyte
Right.
bandwidth, or 32 terabyte bandwidth. That would be that'd be pretty good, right? You'd be doing pretty
Right.
well on a shared host to get to 32 terabytes. But it is important to keep in mind that there are there can be bandwidth limits here, and sometimes like the solution to that is to use something like Wasabi for file storage, so it's not local, or Azure Blob storage or something like that. That's pretty inexpensive versus having a bandwidth cap. Last thing
Yeah.
you want
I
to do
mean,
is
that
hit
is
that
one.
bandwidth cap and then have your website go offline.
Yeah. I mean, I suppose that is definitely an issue with something like a hosting, or uh, others have what they call unmetered bandwidth, which I guess means they're not checking.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, so I guess it really depends, right?
Yeah. It all
So
depends on what you're doing. Like, I can tell you for sure, our site, even though a lot of our media is off site, um, the the KVM one here and KVM two, I'd hit both of them just for PLUGHITZ Live, and our media and half of our images are stored over on Wasabi. Which, by
hmm.
the way,
so
if you're doing online file storage, like for public consumption, Wasabi. It's the
mhm.
not they're not sponsored. I'm not giving a promo code. I don't even think I have one. Check them out. If we're
so
if we're
there's
talking about web
that,
hosting.
right? Yeah, I mean, I guess one thing to keep in mind is right, like um, how much bandwidth do you think you might use, and I don't know what a good way is to try and figure that out. Do
Yeah.
you have a sense of that?
It it's going to depend pretty highly on what you're doing and whether you're doing it correctly. Like if you're hosting a podcast, you shouldn't be hosting that on your shared host. That should be Wasabi or Blueberry or something like that. Um, but if you decided to try and self-host it, like we did in the beginning, which is a terrible idea, um, you can burn through bandwidth real quick, because even if you just do the audio version of F5 Live, uh, it's about 130 meg, 150 meg per episode. So if you do a couple episodes a month and you actually get popular, you can hit your bandwidth. Even at 32 terabyte, you can hit your bandwidth pretty quick. Because catalog grows and people go back and listen to old ones. So I mean, you could hit that pretty quick if you're not careful.
Right.
Which is why something like, and I'll go back to it again because I believe in it. You know, like something like Wasabi, it's fast and it has no egress, so there is no outbound bandwidth. So you just have to, like you said, you just have to figure out what it is that's right for what you're doing. If you're doing a mommy blog, don't worry about bandwidth. You're not going to hit it. It's not a problem. But if you're doing a podcast or something and you're wanting to self-host, you'll hit it quick. So just know what it is you're doing, know what it is you're serving, and if things change, that's the nice thing. If things change, you can move around.
Yep, that makes sense. But a lot of these do kind of commit you to a certain time period to get the prices. So
Sure. But I would imagine, like, if you were in Hostinger and you started at the shared host and you called them up and said, "Hey guys, I got more popular than I thought I was going to. I'd like to go to a cloud host." I imagine they'd help.
yeah, probably.
I'd like to give you more money per month. Okay.
Yeah, I will tell you that I had a situation like that with Bluehost, moving from shared to VPS, and then moving from one VPS to a higher level VPS.
Okay.
And the good news is that yes, they were willing to, like, let us cancel the old plan because we're moving to a new plan. The bad news was that they were completely incapable of helping us of making it easy to move the site.
Oh, no migration?
Yeah, no migration. So
that's rough.
or rather, they claimed that they could help us migrate for like $100 or $150, and then they really could not do it, and I end up doing it myself to the tune of like 20 hours of work. So, and that's even to move from one VPS to another. I was kind of hoping that like they could just like move your stuff, but they could not. So, you would hope that, I don't know, something like a VPS, they could have just said like, "Oh, you paid for the higher plan, great. We're going to turn on like 2 more CPU cores for you by flicking a switch, and another 100 gigs. We'll just assign it to you." But they apparently had to move us to a completely new box, and treat it as a completely new account.
That's entirely the opposite of the point, but okay. I've never personally dealt with Blue. I know some of the other members of TPN have dealt with Blue and have had issues with them in the past. I don't know anybody who's done Hostinger until you said it 15, 20 minutes ago. I'd never heard of it. I know, a number of people on TPN are on GoDaddy, and popping between stuff has seemingly been not a problem. I know DreamHost has been an absolute disaster for people in the past, not just because of the big billing issue they had a while back.
Yeah, I mean, none of these is fantastic.
Sure.
And just because we got good performance on one doesn't necessarily mean that it will be meaningful for you. Mm-hmm. So far, we like Hostinger because it's a good deal. Sure. Although you aren't getting unlimited bandwidth, it's a good deal compared to, say, HostGator and Bluehost, which are 2 other really big names. I really like the customer service, though, and the tools at Scala Hosting, although it didn't do as good with performance. So I think, there's different, we'll continue to do more of these reviews. But I think one thing in general you can take away is, if you want you want flexibility, VPS is better, because then you can do things like run scripts. And obviously I'm coming to it from my own biases, which is that I've used VPS to create all kinds of tool sets that are used by a handful of people and not, a million people. So I'm more concerned about like flexibility and performance than I am about like being able to handle massive bandwidth. So I guess it depends what you need it for.
Right. And that's, it kind of never, it doesn't matter what it is we're talking about. Knowing what it is you're trying to accomplish and using the thing that works best for that, is important because, one of the things we didn't talk about was technology stacks, right? Whether or not these prices support IIS or any of that. So, and sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. Some hosts have support for either IIS or the Apache mod version of it. So, it all depends on what it is you're trying to do, whether or not a particular technology or laptop or camera or phone or whatever, whether or not it's the right one for you because it does your thing.
Yep. Very true.
You said you guys are doing reviews?
Yep. So we have one of hosting up. We have one of HostGator going up probably tomorrow. Like got another 8 that I have benchmarked and we're going to do reviews of. But it's one of those things that, believe it or not, they're not all the same. They're not all the same. They're not all equally worth your money. Obviously, there's a lot of other things to it as well. Some now claim to offer AI to help you, although that's really just building generative AI into things like WordPress so that you can ask it to write an article for you or something.
Right. And there's lots of that out there, including Composer from Copilot.
Yep. True that. Right, well, anyway, so let's knock this out.
Well, definitely appreciate it. I can tell you I have been doing my own version of this, not for public consumption, but as we rebuild some technology here, we are likely to move hosting ourselves. And so, I've been doing some benchmarking, not on WordPress, but again over on IIS, to see where we're going to end up. So always good to have additional information, Avram, and with that, I always appreciate what you bring, and I look forward to what we talk about next time. Hello, YouTube. Thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoyed this episode of The Piltch Point with Avram Piltch. If you did, please subscribe to our channel, and of course hit the notification bell since subscriptions don't mean much on YouTube anymore. And if you've got topics you'd like us to discuss in the future, we'd love to hear from you in the comments below. If you don't want to follow us on YouTube, that's okay. There's a lot of other ways that you can follow our content. You can find all of that by going to plughitslive.com/subscribe. There you'll see all of our shows and all the different ways that you can watch, listen, and follow along.